Climbing a siege ladder first was the most dangerous job in battle. Arrows, fire, and sharp weapons waited at the top, yet some soldiers didn't wait to be pushed. They stepped forward on their own. Why would anyone do that? The answers are unexpected. Before cameras, social media, or even newspapers, a soldier's boldest deeds often died with him. Standing in muddy boots among thousands of other fighters, you were just another face in the crowd. But climb that siege ladder first? Now that was different. Talk about an extreme way to stand out on your medieval resume. In ancient and medieval warfare, siege ladders were basically death traps. Picture this wooden ladder leaning against a stone castle wall while enemy soldiers at the top tried their hardest to push it down. They'd pour boiling water, drop rocks, shoot arrows, or swing swords at whoever dared climb up. It was like trying to climb into a hornet's nest while wearing meat pants. The first person on that ladder had survival chances thinner than watery soup. Yet there was never a shortage of volunteers. Why? Because fame in those days was worth risking everything. Records from the Crusades show that warriors would actually argue about who got to climb first. During the siege of Jerusalem in 1099, knights reportedly shoved each other aside for the honor. Some guys back then were basically fighting to get the medieval equivalent of 1 million followers. One French account tells of a soldier named Bernard who was first up the wall at a castle siege. He died immediately from multiple arrow wounds, but his name lives in that chronicle almost 1,000 years later. Mission accomplished, Bernard. The world's first successful posthumous influencer. Fame wasn't just about ego, though. Having your name in songs and stories meant your family gained respect. Your children might get better marriage options or jobs. Your village might even name something after you. Dad died horribly, but hey, we drink for free at Bernard's Tavern forever. In a world where most people lived and died without anyone beyond their village knowing they existed, this was huge. Some soldiers carried tokens from home, a ribbon, a lock of hair, so witnesses could identify them if they made it to the top before falling. Others made sure to wear distinctive armor or headgear so survivors could report exactly who that brave fool on the ladder was. "Remember me as the guy with the bright red helmet," were often someone's actual last words. Think of it as trying to go viral, except instead of risking embarrassment, you're risking having your head turned into a castle decoration. Talk about commitment to content creation. The funny thing is, even commanders knew this was a powerful motivator. Before a siege, they'd sometimes publicly ask for volunteers, making a show of remembering names. They knew that promised fame was cheaper than promised gold and just as effective. Of course, fame wasn't the only reward waiting at the top of those siege ladders. Sometimes there was something far more immediate and shiny to consider. For many soldiers, climbing the siege ladder first was their fastest ticket to better ranks and rewards. In armies across history, commanders rewarded this deadly courage with instant promotions. Unlike today's militaries with clear advancement paths, medieval and ancient armies often promoted based on who survived doing the craziest brave stuff. Let's break it down. Most regular soldiers lived rough lives. They slept on the ground, ate whatever they could find, and carried heavy stuff all day long. Officers, on the other hand, got tents, better food, and sometimes even horses. The difference between being a regular soldier and an officer was like the difference between flying economy class versus first class. Except economy meant you might also get stabbed. Military records from the Roman Empire show that soldiers who performed exceptional acts during sieges, like being first up the wall, could skip several ranks instantly. One Roman account mentions a soldier who climbed a siege tower during the siege of Jerusalem in 70 CE and was immediately promoted from basic legionary to optio, the second in command of a century of men. The math made sense to many soldiers. A 1 in 3 chance of dying on the ladder versus guaranteed decades of grunt work. Many chose the latter. Their reasoning, die as nobody or risk it all for a shot at something better. In medieval Europe, the rewards got even better. Knights and men-at-arms who led charges could receive lands and titles. During the 100 Years' War between England and France, English archers who showed exceptional bravery in sieges sometimes received small holdings, turning simple bowmen into landowners overnight. What made siege ladder climbing especially attractive was how visible it was. Everyone saw who went first. Your commander couldn't deny your bravery later. It was the medieval equivalent of getting your boss's promotion promise in writing, except the paper was soaked in your own blood. Armies back then didn't have HR departments or promotion boards. What they did have was chaos, and in that chaos, bold moves stood out. Commanders needed people they could trust to lead dangerous missions, and what better proof of courage than watching someone scale a wall while arrows rained down? The rewards didn't stop at just higher rank. Promoted soldiers got more pay, better weapons, less grueling duties, and more rest. Some armies even gave special patches or helmet decorations to soldiers who had been first up walls. These markers meant instant respect from comrades and fear from enemies. For many soldiers from poor backgrounds, the military was their only way up in the world. Farming meant staying poor forever, but the army offered a chance, slim as it might be, to become someone important. All you had to do was survive that climb. While promotion motivated many to take the deadly climb, others had their eyes on more immediate treasures. Gold, silver, spices, and jewels. These treasures waited inside city walls, and the first soldiers to break through a siege got first pick of the prizes. This first in, first served rule of plunder drove many men up those deadly ladders when nothing else could. Most soldiers throughout history received little or no regular pay. During the Middle Ages, a common foot soldier might earn just 3 or 4 pennies a day, hardly enough to buy a decent meal. But the loot from a conquered city, that could set someone up for life. When the Crusaders took Jerusalem in 1099, soldiers who reached the city first claimed enormous wealth. One knight reportedly found enough gold coins in a single house to buy a castle back home. The wealth inside conquered cities could be staggering. Everything from gold cups to silk tapestries to exotic spices worth more than their weight in silver. First breach, first pick wasn't just a saying, it was practically carved into every siege ladder. Military commanders officially recognized this rule, knowing it motivated their men better than any speech about duty or honor ever could. The math was simple. Wait in line with everyone else and you'd get the leftovers, broken pottery and empty boxes. Make it up the wall first and you might find the treasury before anyone else. Risk versus reward at its most basic. During the siege of Constantinople in 1204, the first crusaders to enter the city found treasures that had been hidden for centuries. Some soldiers became so wealthy from a single day of looting that they never had to work again. One account describes a simple foot soldier who climbed through a window early in the breach and discovered a chest of jewels that made him richer than the knight he served. Not all loot was gold and jewels. Captured weapons and armor were highly prized too. Good steel was expensive, and taking an enemy's well-crafted sword or shield saved a soldier from having to buy his own. The first men into a city often claimed the best weapons from armories before they were picked clean. Even food counted as treasure during long campaigns. Cities under siege typically had stockpiles of grain, wine, and preserved meats. A hungry soldier might risk death by arrow just for the chance to eat something that wasn't army rations, which throughout history have consistently ranked somewhere between barely edible and possibly not even food. Of course, many soldiers who climbed for gold never lived to spend it, but hope is a powerful force. Each man who grabbed that ladder thought, "Others died, but I'll be the lucky one who makes it through." While dreams of wealth pushed many up those wooden rungs, others climbed for reasons that cash and treasures couldn't explain. After all, not every soldier was driven by what they might find in the enemy's strongbox. Volunteering wasn't always about glory, it was loyalty. Military units throughout history formed bonds stronger than family. These connections pushed many soldiers up siege ladders when their friends took the first steps. Roman legions trained, ate, slept, and fought as units for years at a time. Their Latin word contubernium described the 8-man squad that shared a tent and all aspects of daily life. When one man from such a group volunteered to climb, others often followed without hesitation. Historical accounts from the Roman siege of Masada show entire squads volunteering together rather than letting one man face danger alone. Medieval military units followed similar patterns. Knights who trained together since childhood created battle groups called conroys, where each member swore to protect the others. These knights would literally take an arrow for each other, not because they were nice guys, but because finding decent friends in the 1200s was even harder than finding reliable Wi-Fi in a coffee shop today. Most armies developed traditions around these brotherhoods. Viking warriors believed that dying alongside your shield brothers meant you'd feast together in Valhalla. Samurai stressed absolute loyalty to fellow warriors above personal safety. Turkish Janissaries, elite troops of the Ottoman Empire, slept in the same barracks from childhood and considered their unit their only family. Military records from the 1400s show that when commanders asked for ladder climbers, often entire groups stepped forward together. One French chronicle describes 5 soldiers who had fought together for 7 years, volunteering as a complete unit. 4 died on the ladder, but they died together. This brotherhood sometimes became official military policy. The Spartans famously paired soldiers as battle buddies, creating unbreakable 2-man teams. If your partner climbed the ladder, you climbed too, no questions asked. This practice spread through many Greek armies, where battle pairs were called heniokoikai parabatai, literally the chariot driver and the fighter who stands beside him. Beyond formal military structures, simple friendship drove many volunteers. Letters home from soldiers throughout history repeatedly mention not wanting to appear cowardly in front of friends as motivation for dangerous acts. In one collection of medieval battlefield letters, the phrase, "I couldn't let him go alone," appears more than any other explanation for bravery. This loyalty wasn't just emotional, it was practical. Soldiers who trusted each other survived better. Fighting alongside someone who knew your strengths and weaknesses improved everyone's chances. Having a trusted friend beside you on the battlefield was like having autocorrect for your sword arm, stopping mistakes before they became fatal. While brotherhood pushed many weathered veterans up those deadly ladders, something else entirely motivated some of the youngest soldiers. Many volunteers for siege ladders were teenage boys trying to prove themselves. Youth brings a special kind of bravery, the kind that comes from not fully understanding danger. Throughout history, armies have been filled with surprisingly young soldiers, many just 14 or 15 years old when they first marched to war. Did you know that during the Crusades, about 1/3 of all knights were under 20? Medieval military records show that these younger knights volunteered for dangerous duties at twice the rate of older, more experienced fighters. They hadn't yet seen enough death to be properly scared of it. Young soldiers often had a distorted view of battle shaped by stories they'd heard. Songs and tales emphasized glory and victory, not the messy, painful reality of combat. War stories sounded way cooler when told around a campfire by someone with an impressive beard and a missing eye than they did when you were actually standing at the bottom of a siege ladder watching the guy ahead of you get turned into a human pincushion. The teenage brain itself plays a role in this phenomenon. Modern science confirms what military commanders have known for centuries. Young people are naturally more willing to take risks. The part of the brain that fully processes danger and long-term consequences doesn't finish developing until around age 25. That's why throughout history, most armies preferred recruiting teenagers. They were literally biologically programmed to make bolder, sometimes reckless choices. The desire to impress older soldiers pushed many young fighters to volunteer. In most armies, new recruits faced constant teasing and hazing until they proved themselves. Volunteering for the siege ladder was the fastest way to shut up the veterans who'd been calling you baby for weeks. Your courage might still get you killed, but at least you wouldn't die being mocked. Historical documents reveal how military leaders exploited this youth psychology. Before difficult assaults, commanders often directly challenged the youngest soldiers with phrases like, "Which of you young men wants to show the old warriors how it's done?" Records from numerous sieges show these taunts worked remarkably well at producing volunteers. For teenagers far from home, the military also became a substitute family, with commanders as father figures. Wanting approval from these authority figures drove many young soldiers to take insane risks. Getting a nod of respect from your grizzled old captain felt better than a million medieval TikTok likes. Status among peers mattered enormously too. Young soldiers desperately wanted to be accepted into the brotherhood of fighters. Being the first up a ladder earned instant respect and might finally get you invited to sit at the cool kids' table around the campfire. While youthful overconfidence sent many climbing toward their doom, others were motivated by much deeper beliefs. For some, the ladder didn't lead just to the top of a wall, but to something far more eternal. In religious wars, martyrdom was a real incentive for climbing the siege ladder first. Faith gave many soldiers courage that no amount of gold or glory could match. During the Crusades especially, dying in battle against infidels was marketed as a direct path to paradise. Talk about the ultimate upgrade package. Die painfully now. Enjoy eternity later. The church actively promoted this idea. Before battle, priests would tell crusaders that those who died fighting would have all sins forgiven. No confession needed, no penance required. Just a quick death and straight to heaven. Basically, a spiritual express lane with no waiting in line at the pearly gates. The world's first skip-the-queue pass had a pretty steep price tag. Historical records from the First Crusade show how powerful this motivation was. When Christian armies attacked Jerusalem in 1099, soldiers reportedly fought over who would climb the siege ladders first, believing that martyrdom there, in the holy city, held special spiritual value. The more dangerous the mission, the greater the heavenly reward. Location, location, location. Even in martyrdom, real estate matters. This wasn't unique to Christianity. Muslim warriors during the same period believed that dying while defending or reclaiming holy sites guaranteed entry to paradise. The Arabic term shaheed referred to martyrs who died in battle, and accounts from both sides of these conflicts describe fighters seemingly unafraid of death. Religious texts were often read to troops before battle. These readings focused on heroes who sacrificed themselves and were rewarded in the afterlife. Commanders knew that soldiers who feared divine judgment more than enemy swords made excellent volunteers for suicide missions. The physical preparations were just as important as the spiritual ones. Before a siege, religious soldiers would often fast, pray, and confess their sins. Many had a priest or holy man bless their weapons and armor. Some even carried small religious tokens or had prayers written on parchment sewn into their clothing. Many siege ladders received special blessings too. Priests would sprinkle holy water on them and say prayers asking for divine protection for the climbers. God might not stop arrows, but a blessed ladder was supposed to be sturdier. Though, as one medieval chronicle noted, the Lord helps those who climb quickly. Medieval priests, history's first motivational coaches. This faith-based courage had measurable military value. Contemporary accounts describe how opposing forces were sometimes terrified by attackers who seemed to have no fear of death. Turkish defenders at Antioch reportedly abandoned their posts when faced with crusaders who kept climbing despite heavy losses, convinced they were facing men protected by supernatural powers. For many ordinary soldiers from deeply religious backgrounds, the choice seemed simple: die in bed years later with an uncertain spiritual fate, or die gloriously in battle with a guaranteed spot in heaven. When framed this way, the siege ladder didn't look so scary. While faith pushed many toward martyrdom, other powerful emotions drove soldiers to volunteer too. Some feelings burned even hotter than religious fervor, turning fear into something altogether more dangerous. Some men had lost family or homes to the enemy. Volunteering to go first felt like justice, not risk. Anger turned fear into action. It burned hotter than hesitation. Historical records from the 100 Years' War show soldiers whose villages had been burned by enemy forces volunteering at 4 times the rate of other troops. Their reasoning was simple: when you've lost everything, you have nothing left to lose. During the Reconquista in Spain, Christian soldiers who had watched Muslim forces take their land years earlier climbed ladders with such ferocity that Arab chroniclers described them as possessed by devils. These weren't professional warriors, but farmers and craftsmen driven by memories of lost homes. Revenge is the original energy drink. No sugar needed, just pure burning hatred to keep you going up that ladder when common sense says to run the other way. The desire for payback created some of history's most determined ladder climbers. In one account from the Crusades, a knight whose brother had been executed by defenders of a fortress refused 3 orders to retreat from a siege ladder. Despite being wounded by 5 arrows, he continued climbing until he reached the top, where he killed 7 defenders before collapsing. Military leaders recognized the power of personal grudges. During the Italian wars of the 1400s, commanders deliberately spread stories about enemy atrocities before sieges, often exaggerating incidents to fuel revenge-seeking among troops. Angry soldiers climb faster and fear less. Normal soldiers might climb a ladder until the guy in front gets killed, then decide maybe guard duty looks pretty appealing. Revenge seekers would climb over their friends' bodies while mentally naming each arrow they shot after a lost loved one. While fury drove many up those wooden rungs toward vengeance, sometimes the courage to climb came from sources that had nothing to do with noble emotions at all. Sometimes a soldier's boldness came from something much more social. Some soldiers drank before a siege, on purpose. Alcohol dulled fear and boosted confidence, whether it should or not. Throughout military history, armies supplied their troops with alcohol before major assaults, especially those involving siege ladders. Ancient Egyptian records show soldiers received double rations of beer before assaults on fortified cities. This practice continued across civilizations. Roman troops got extra wine. Medieval armies distributed ale, and even into the 1800s, British troops received a tot of rum before particularly dangerous attacks. Why did commanders allow this? They discovered what modern science later confirmed. Alcohol reduces fear response. For siege ladder volunteers, this chemical courage meant the difference between hesitating at the bottom or charging upward regardless of arrows raining down. Turns out, "hold my beer and watch this" wasn't just a modern phrase, it was basically medieval military strategy. In many armies, the drinking before battle became ritualized. Viking warriors participated in drinking ceremonies where they boasted about brave deeds they would perform in the coming fight. These boasts, made in front of everyone, became nearly impossible to back out of the next morning. Many ladder volunteers were simply following through on drunken promises. Group drinking proved especially effective at producing volunteers. Soldiers who might hesitate when sober found themselves caught up in the bravado of their drinking companions. Volunteers often stepped forward mid-cheer or mid-chant. The amount of alcohol consumed before battle was carefully controlled by experienced commanders. Too little meant fear remained. Too much meant warriors couldn't climb straight. Medieval army manuals recommended soldiers drink just enough to see one ladder, not two, when looking at the walls. When siege engineering failed, when religious motivation wasn't enough, when even revenge couldn't push men up those deadly ladders, commanders throughout history reached for the wine barrel. It wasn't glorious or honorable, but it worked with remarkable consistency across cultures and time periods. And when the battle ended, those who survived to reach the top had stories to tell, and often more drinks to celebrate with.